Hello, I'm Hushjo, and this is Let's H. Click on the Read More, visit some of the links, become a patron on Patreon for more quality content. Although this is technically a part of my Angel Season 5 reviews, this is also a bonus review. This is one of the episodes that I initially wasn't going to do, but I was persuaded not only by the fact that it ties up a part of the storyline, but it was also one I was asked to do because overall Cordelia is probably my favorite Buffyverse character. As some of you might imagine, this had a lot to do with my intense hatred for Season 4, and to be quite honest, this episode rates on my all-time least favorites. It's one of those things where it could have been good if they had handled it differently, and a lot of the episode is actually adequate for what it is. I'm referring, of course, to the episode You're Welcome, which is the 12th episode of Season 5. This is actually the climax of Spike's hero story, which kinda sucks, because there's a lot of build-up up to now, and there's also that really terrible previous episode, but that was actually supposed to lead up to a Buffy feature in Angel. They'd been trying since basically the first season to get Buffy to come back to the show, and especially after the fact that Buffy the Vampire Slayer had ended, it would have been something that they would have been able to advertise as a huge triumph, getting the character of Buffy to actually appear in Angel's show. As such, this episode had been written for Buffy, and that's part of the reason why I hate this episode, is because it was written for Buffy, not Cordelia. It was very quickly rewritten to be for Cordelia instead, and on some respects, it actually works better as a Cordelia episode. But there's also that same disrespectful feeling of it being a Buffy episode that they just rewrote at the last moment because Sarah Michelle Gellar was not willing to reprise the role and Charisma Carpenter was available at the time. That having been said, however, it does hit on a number of notes, mainly reminding people why they liked the show in the first place. She catches up with Wes, she shows the strengths of her character, which had kind of been lost in the previous season. Season 4 was a terrible season. It was the worst season of Angel. People can talk about Season 5 all they want to. It was bad overall, but it was not nearly as bad as Season 4. Season 4 sucked on every possible level. It wasn't necessarily because of any of the characters in it being terrible, other than Jasmine and, of course, Connor. What is it about Offspring characters? Characters that are the children of other characters tend to be the worst characters. But it was just an especially tacky way to treat Cordelia. Yet again, she kept getting these pregnancy storylines, and it was so frequent that it caused the character to actually comment on it at one point. Probably because the fans had commented on it. It was disconcertingly frequent and common for Cordelia to have these storylines, and I do understand that part of it was written to accommodate Charisma Carpenter's real-life pregnancy, and that's fine. It's a neat way to write around a real-life pregnancy, is to write a fictional one and develop that the best you can. You know, I understand if someone wants to keep working throughout their pregnancy, that's a good way to do it. It's a creative way to do it. However, Season 4 was crap. It was absolute shit. And even though you tried, it was awful. There's just no. Which brings us to You're Welcome. Cordelia had been left in a coma at the end of Season 4, which, as I have said many times, I prefer it when you're trying to write a character out if you leave them able to pick up a role later. It's generally better, and I believe I said this even in the intro of my Angel reviews, to leave a character able to be written back into the show. If a show's going to continue indefinitely, you don't want to just kill off a character. If you kill off a character, you're limiting your audience and reducing your audience, because every character is someone's favorite character. If you don't give a shit, fine, whatever. But if you do actually care about your audience, and when you're actually profiting on a TV show, it behooves you to care. Write them out with an option to be written back in. Supernatural is kind of a prime example, the poster child, if you will, for very poorly doing this. They had so many interesting supporting characters, and 90% of them are gone now. They couldn't even spin off a show at this point. They don't have enough surviving characters to do that. So while I thought that Season 4 of Angel was total shit, it at least gave Cordelia a way to come back to the series if the actress chose to readopt the character. Unfortunately, what we got was this episode. Everybody was excited because they thought, oh hey, Cordelia's gonna come back. And it was great. She takes Angel to task, she calls people on their bullshit, she puts Eve in her place, she even gets a great reunion with Harmony and Lorne, and Fred is in the episode, and Wes is in the episode. As I've said before, he kind of sleepwalks through the season. Although it is remarkable that this is the one episode, and this is funny because, like, he has an episode that focuses more on him and, like, his specific history and his family, and this is the one episode. He has a scene where he's interacting with Cordy in his office, and they're doing research, and they reflect on how it used to be, how they used to do this. And that's the only scene, the single scene in season 5 where he actually seems to emote. It's remarkable. And it's also very sad, because it's the only one. There are some clumsy hints dropped during the episode. Overall, it's very poorly set up for the ultimate attempt at a gut punch, which makes me think that it was either half-assedly done by Whedon, which rumours exist to substantiate, or it was something influenced by Greenwald. Honestly, there was a lot of stuff going on that made the actors very uncomfortable. I know this episode was specifically written by David Fury, who also directed it. Of course, I refer to the overarching season story and the heads of writing. At this point, I think it was probably very difficult and kind of uncomfortable for a lot of the people involved, and that doesn't make me comfortable watching it. In fact, Season 5 makes me uncomfortable in a lot of ways because, while it's clear that they are trying to improve the show in some way, they're not really going about it in the best way possible. There were touches that made it seem like they were trying, but on the other hand, they weren't trying very hard. You look at this episode and you think, wow, that last scene, fuck you too. Because they could have very easily had Cordelia leave, as she did in the original version of the script. In fact, they were trying to hide the ending that was supposed to be the real shocker, the real gut punch, but of course it leaked before it was broadcast, so that completely failed. But it was an inferior version. It was stupid. They could have easily had it mean something, but it was another clumsy attempt to kill off a character without actually killing off the character, because we all knew that Cordelia was a higher being. She had come back in season 4, but that was a whole clusterfuck that we didn't even need to get into. Not only does this kind of oversimplify things in the episode, but it also leads to a real anticlimax for that whole storyline with Lindsay coming back. Why even bring him back if you're gonna have so much nothing happen? It's neat that he has a fight with Angel, but really? That's as simple as Angel is? I mean, Cordelia says he's kinda dumb, but it's supposed to be an affectionate tease. We're not supposed to actually think that Angel's only role is hitting things really hard, and that's the only thing that motivates him. That's just stupid. A similar thing happens in the absolutely awful first season episode I Will Remember You, where essentially Angel is willing to turn back time and undo becoming human and being able to be with Buffy, whom he still apparently has feelings for, because he's not able to hit things hard anymore. This is a really unfortunate throwback to that. When we see Cordelia and the other characters of the main regular cast interacting, it actually makes it seem like there's something worth watching. It reminds us that once upon a time this show was actually good. It reminds us of The Hotel, for example, when there's a throwaway line when she's preparing to go back with them. Why wasn't this explored more? It's rushed, it's ridiculous, it's obviously an episode that was not written for the character, and it's these moments where it simultaneously feels like it's showing us what the show was like when we enjoyed it, and also reminding us that this was just a last-minute rewrite. It's very disrespectful to the character, and I know that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that may or may not be true, whatever, but this was a very bad idea, and the ending makes it extremely tacky. It probably rates as my least favorite episode of Angel solely due to its shitty ending. And I don't mean shitty as in downbeat, I mean shitty as in poorly done. That entire last scene is utterly cheapened and made meaningless by the ending, which has the poorest poorest reaction from the people in it. It's not effective. It's another attempt at a Whedon gut punch that simply is not effective, especially when you consider the rest of the episode. The storyline that's been building up until now basically has a literal deus ex machina. Cordelia is reduced to a deus ex machina. Buffy would have been so much better in the role. Not surprisingly, since it was written for Buffy, but it would have worked better if her character was there to move the plot and say, look, you need to get back on track because this is not you. Given Cordelia knows him a lot better than Buffy does, actually. Angel as a person has developed much more since the start of his show than he ever did around Buffy. He's simply hanging on to a shadow at this point. However, it would have been good for Buffy to be able to make peace with Angel, and for Angel to make peace with Buffy in this episode, for them to be able to say, we're on different paths, and part as friends, after giving each other much-needed strength. The way this ends up, it just gives a meaningless message. To boot, it contributed to a kind of misogynistic feel for the final season. And you know me, I don't buy into a lot of the shit that people attribute to Buffy, but this season wrote out literally all of its female regulars that had been there up to this point, and in both cases did it in unnecessarily melodramatic and disrespectful ways. Just like, why bring Lindsay back if this is all you're going to do with him? The same could be said of Cordelia. Why bring her back? This is what you're gonna do. You clearly have no right to work with the character if this is all you can think to do with her. While I have said before, and I will stick by this, I do like the character of Illyria, and I think it's important that Amy Acker actually gets something to do with the character, rather than just sit around as a story has been completely told. But they couldn't even show that they got Fred before. She was just the science person. They apparently didn't realize that engineering is not the same as undertaking either, because they actually have her conduct an autopsy in one episode. This is concerning. It seems like there wasn't a lot of respect for any of the characters, but characters like Fred and Cordelia come out of it seeming particularly disrespected, and it's something that bothered me, and it's something that I feel is a legitimate concern for people pointing fingers at maybe this was kind of a bad choice overall. If they wanted to have Cordelia come back and then go off on her own, they should have just kind of done that. And they also might have built up a little bit more of the hopefulness of her becoming an ascended being, which is exactly what she was supposed to do, because inspiring someone and then pulling a bullshit turn like that is not gonna give them hope. It's gonna make them depressed. Also reminding them how much better things are than the way they are now, and calling them on their bullshit and reminding them that a lot of their reasons are completely lies and lying to themselves as well as everyone else, that's also not a good idea. They can claim all they like, what with the last kiss giving him a vision or something, but it wasn't in the episode. It's not in the script. It's something that's a retcon, which means retroactive continuity. That basically means we decided it later and decided to claim it had happened earlier, even though it clearly did not. Great moments during this episode are Cordelia's reactions to Eve, which is wonderful. I didn't ask is the best line in the whole episode. I love her calling Angel to task. I love her interactions with Wes. It was a pity that she didn't get more time to interact with Gunn, especially considering what happened to him later in the season, and what happened with the conflict of his character. It seems odd and standoutish that she didn't really comment on that, and that they didn't have any time together. Also, she does pretty much absolutely nothing with Fred, but then nobody does anything with Fred, because Fred is basically wallpaper during this season. She's either providing token lines or fulfilling some obligatory role to move the script along until she turns into Illyria and actually gets a moment to try and wring some sympathy out of people that were done with her a season ago. Sad but true. But meaningless ending aside, and episode weakness aside, and general stupidity and incompetence on last-minute rewrites on a script not intended for the character, this probably turned out about as good as it possibly could. The flashbacks were good. The callbacks were good. The remembering when the show was actually good was nice. Cordelia got some great lines. She got to kick a little ass. She got to do something fun. And with Lindsay in the episode too, it was like a flashback to that moment a couple of years ago when the show was actually watchable and you looked forward to seeing what they were going to do. Unfortunately, like I was saying before, when you ruin that with a shitty ending, you make people jump ship, because that doesn't make them tune in next week to see what they're going to do. It doesn't make them feel like, oh hey, I wonder how they're going to do this next week, reminding me that the show was once good and then assuring me that it's not going to be that good anymore by getting rid of the characters in stupid ways. I also don't see where it was even smart for Lindsay to call himself Doyle. That was stupid. All that was a callback to the first season. That's all. All of these things were just trying to remind us of the things we liked about the show and confuse us into thinking that that affection applied to the show now. We're not that stupid. It was a bad show, and reminding us of when it was better is a very poor idea, because we're just going to go and get out our DVDs of the earlier seasons and watch them instead. In a way, that's just kind of this episode in a nutshell. It's a big fuck you to people that stayed with this show for this long, and for a lot of people it was the end of their interest in the show. I know plenty of people who just jumped ship. They knew the show was probably not going to get picked up again for another year. They felt like it had played out, and this was the last straw. This was something that was saying, here's what we used to do. We're not doing that anymore for some reason. Bye. And for me, that just seems like a big middle finger. Why continue on when a show has, in no uncertain terms, let you know that everything you liked about it is gone? It's really a different show now. Angel Season 5 isn't Angel. It's not the series that it was. I mean, Season 4 was garbage too, but Season 5 tries to do more of its own thing, and even though it does distinguish itself by taking new direction and doing some things well, it's not the series that it was supposed to be. It's not the series that it ever was, and it's way too late in its lifetime to redefine the direction of a series. Overall, this has got to be the worst episode of this season. You can get into it if you don't think about it, but then when that last scene comes, you think, wow, that was extremely disrespectful. And if I think about it, was obviously an episode written for another character, not Cordelia. It's only Charisma Carpenter's excellent acting and chemistry with the rest of the regular cast that she acted with for 4 years that makes this seem anything like an episode that was supposed to feature her at all. It would have been better with Buffy, which is something I never thought I would say about anything, but if they had to have Cordelia, just have her leave at the end. It doesn't make any sense to do this, and it definitely doesn't make any sense in an episode that's supposed to encourage Angel and reassure him to have such a stupid, downbeat ending. The only thing it would encourage him to do is spend an eternity in his bedroom brooding as he does. Unfortunately, nothing really changes after the episode either, which makes it seem like she didn't make that much of an impact. That's a terrible tragedy. Furthermore, the episode demonstrates more than almost anything else, why there needs to be a character like Cordelia, and that no one else had filled that role. This was a role that was desperately needed on the show, and one that was going empty. To have it filled for even a moment and then empty again just makes it seem like a lesser show, which is exactly what it was by that time. Two other points to be made are that Cordelia was operating on behalf of the powers that be, and also that she was an ascended being, essentially a goddess. You're telling me that she couldn't, if she chose to, incarnate herself as she did in Season 4 and help him if she wanted to. It didn't have to be that way. It was needlessly ridiculous, and it's even lampshaded in the episode that Wolfram and Hart rewrote reality, which is why Angel bought into their stupid agreement in the first place. He did it for Connor. So you're telling me that the powers that be, what amounts to the god-level forces in this universe, neither they nor Cordelia could do anything about this? Yet another trait that makes it clear this episode was written for Buffy. But even if they could, Angel in the past has gone to the mat for Cordelia. Remember the episode in Season 3 where she became half-demon? Yeah, about that. He went to the powers. He was not willing to be told no. It wasn't exactly his best moment, but it was still something that should be looked at. It's aspects like these that are really telling of what the intent of the episode was versus how it came out. That intent is still there, even if you rewrite the fine details and add in a reference or two that makes it seem like the character was meant to be there. Under even the slightest scrutiny, that's clearly not the case. Yet another reason why Cordelia disappearing mysteriously might have been a better ending altogether and just nothing else. Whedon, you don't need to kill off every character when they choose to leave. It's not clever, it's not funny, and nobody is in the slightest bit amused. Especially if you even bother to give it the slightest thought. I'd also like to say, and I mentioned this before, what a disappointment for this story. It has been building for 5 episodes now. Spike barely even features in this episode, and this is the culmination of his Spike as a hero storyline. This started off with him being turned into a corporeal being from a ghost again. And this is the climax? He was barely in the episode. It's yet another reason why this episode is such a giant donkey mess. It sweeps you along and uses the cameo very effectively, I will admit. You don't want to think about what a bad episode it is or how shoddily and sloppily it's written. But it is. If you look at it, it's very sloppy. It's obviously last moment. It's obviously poorly done. And it is not, absolutely not, the culmination of this story that it should have had. But this isn't the only time that a story with a massive build-up has an extremely disappointing climax. I'm talking, of course, about the season itself. But that is a story for another day. So there you have my least favorite episode of Buffy or Angel. You're welcome. I'm Mushcho. See you next time. Bye.